Steve Harvey broke down in tears when he heard this child's last wish, and what he did next left everyone in shock. The beloved TV host, known for his humor and confidence, found himself completely overwhelmed by emotion. No one expected the lengths he would go to for a child he'd never met before. This is the story of how one small wish changed multiple lives forever, and why fans couldn't believe what Steve did in response. Steve Harvey had it all: fame, fortune, and a career most could only dream of. His charismatic presence on Family Feud and his no-nonsense advice on his talk show had made him a household name. His schedule was packed with appearances, endorsements, and tapings. Success surrounded him like a fortress. At 65, he had climbed to the pinnacle of entertainment, overcoming obstacles that would have broken most people. His signature laugh could be heard in living rooms across America, a testament to his incredible journey, from homelessness to Hollywood royalty. But across the country, in a small hospital room in Cincinnati, 12-year-old Jordan Mitchell was fighting a different kind of battle. The walls of his room were covered with pictures of his favorite TV personalities, and right in the center was Steve Harvey. Jordan's mother would later recall how her son would light up whenever Steve appeared on screen, momentarily forgetting the pain that had become his constant companion. For 3 years, Jordan had been battling an aggressive form of leukemia that had robbed him of a normal childhood. Instead of playgrounds and school hallways, Jordan knew hospital corridors and chemotherapy rooms all too well. Yet somehow, he maintained a spirit that amazed even the most seasoned doctors. "Mom, do you think Steve Harvey ever gets sad?" Jordan had asked one evening, after watching an episode of Family Feud. The question hung in the air as his mother struggled to find an answer. What she didn't know was that her son had already started writing a letter, one that would travel across states and eventually reach the hands of the famous host. Jordan had spent hours crafting each word, often pausing when the pain became too much, but always returning to the page with renewed determination. The nurses had watched him working on it for days, his small face contorted with concentration despite the discomfort from his latest round of treatments. The letter sat for 3 days on Steve's assistant's desk, mixed in with the mountain of fan mail he received daily. It almost didn't make it through. But something about the handwriting, slightly shaky but determined, caught his assistant's eye, and she placed it on top of the small stack selected for Steve to personally review. The envelope was slightly crumpled, bearing the marks of its journey. A small drawing of a smiling face decorated the corner, a child's attempt to ensure his message stood out among thousands. What Steve didn't know was that this single envelope contained words that would shake him to his very core. Words written by small hands that had endured more needle pricks and hospital stays than any child should ever have to face. Words that carried the weight of a young soul facing mortality far too soon. The letter had traveled over 300 miles, passing through numerous hands, nearly lost twice in transit, before finally reaching its destination. As Steve reached for the letter during a rare, quiet moment between tapings, he had no idea that the next few minutes would completely transform his life. He casually tore open the envelope, expecting another sweet fan letter to briefly warm his heart before moving on with his busy day. The studio lights were being adjusted for the next segment, and his makeup artist stood nearby, ready to do touch-ups. It was just another Tuesday in the life of Steve Harvey until it wasn't tea, but the words in that letter would soon reduce the famously composed host to tears and force him to confront a pain he'd been hiding from the world, a pain that resonated with Jordan's struggle in ways no one could have anticipated. As Steve's eyes scanned the first few lines, his expression changed. The transformation was subtle at first, a slight furrow of the brow, a momentary pause in his breathing, but it signaled the beginning of something profound. Something that would eventually shock not just his immediate circle, but millions of fans across the nation. The backstage area of the Family Feud studio was typically a hive of activity producers, rushing with clipboards, interns fetching coffee, makeup artists touching up contestants. But when Steve Harvey retreated to his private dressing room that afternoon, he sought a rare moment of solitude. The letter from Jordan was still in his hands, the paper now slightly crinkled from his tightening grip. The familiar scent of the studio, a mixture of hairspray, coffee, and the faint residue of cleaning products seemed suddenly stifling as he closed the door behind him. Just another piece of fan mail, he had told himself moments earlier, settling into his leather chair. Steve received hundreds of letters every week, heartfelt thank yous, requests for advice, invitations to events he could never possibly attend. His team had a system for handling them, and only a select few ever made it to his personal attention. This one, with its childish handwriting and hospital return address, had seemed important enough to read between tapings. He had 15 minutes before he needed to be back on set, more than enough time to read a child's letter and dictate a kind response to his assistant. The first few sentences seemed innocent enough. "Dear Mr. Harvey, my name is Jordan Mitchell. I am 12 years old, and the doctors say I might not see my 13th birthday." Steve paused, taking a deep breath. He'd received letters from sick children before. They were always difficult to read. But he developed a professional ability to maintain emotional distance while still responding with genuine compassion. Years in the spotlight had taught him how to compartmentalize, to offer warmth without becoming overwhelmed by the countless heartbreaking stories that found their way to his inbox. But as his eyes continued down the page, something changed. Jordan wasn't asking for an autograph or a video message. He wasn't even asking to meet his television hero. What the boy had written struck a chord so deep within Steve that his hands began to visibly shake. The carefully constructed walls between his public persona and private self began to crumble. Brick by emotional brick. "The nurses let me watch Family Feud every day," Jordan had written. "When you laugh, it makes me forget I'm sick. Mom says you used to be homeless before you got famous. I wanted to tell you something I've never told anyone, not even my mom." The handwriting became shakier here, as if the child had hesitated, gathering courage before continuing. Small water stains dotted the paper tears, Steve realized, that had fallen as Jordan wrote these words from his hospital bed. Steve's production assistant, Marissa, would later recall the moment she heard something unusual from behind the dressing room door. In her 5 years working with the star, she had never once heard him cry. Shout in frustration occasionally, yes. Laugh boisterously, absolutely. But the sound that emerged from that room was something altogether different. It started as a sharp intake of breath, followed by what sounded like a muffled sob. Concerned, she had paused outside the door, her hand raised to knock, but something stopped her. The vulnerability in those sounds made her step back, respecting a moment that felt too private to interrupt. Inside, Steve had slumped forward in his chair, the letter trembling in his hands as tears streamed down his face, threatening to ruin the makeup that had been so carefully applied just 30 minutes earlier. The words on the page had pierced through every layer of celebrity armor he'd built over decades. His broad shoulders, usually squared with confidence, now shook with each breath. The studio lights from the hallway filtered under the door, casting long shadows across the room as the afternoon sun began its descent outside. Jordan's letter continued with a confession that mirrored a secret chapter of Steve's own life, one he had carefully kept hidden from the public eye, a burden he had carried silently even as he brought joy to millions. The coincidence was so striking, so impossibly aligned with his own experiences, that it felt like more than chance. It felt like destiny. It was as if this child, fighting for his life in a hospital bed hundreds of miles away, had somehow peered directly into the most guarded corners of Steve's soul. "I've never seen him like that," Marissa would later tell the production team. "He was completely broken down. When he finally opened the door, his eyes were red, his face was wet, and he just stood there, looking completely lost. The usually composed, quick-witted host seemed to have vanished, replaced by a man visibly grappling with raw emotion. His custom-tailored suit, normally worn with such confidence, now seemed to hang differently on his frame, as if the weight of what he read had physically diminished him. The show's director approached, clipboard in hand, ready to remind Steve they were behind schedule. One look at his star's face stopped him mid-sentence. The studio audience had been waiting for 12 minutes already, an eternity in television time. The network executives would be calling soon. But none of that seemed to matter in the face of whatever had just transpired. "I need 30 minutes, Steve managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Cancel the next taping if you have to." There was a firmness beneath the emotion, the voice of a man who had made a decision that wouldn't be negotiated away. The director nodded silently, knowing that in 15 years of working in television, he had never seen anything quite like this. He closed the door again, leaving his team exchanging worried glances in the hallway. Inside, Steve read the letter a second time, then a third, each reading bringing fresh tears and a deepening resolve. The words seemed to burn themselves into his memory, creating connections between his past struggles and this childish present battle. He reached for his phone, scrolling to a contact he rarely called, someone from his past who would understand the weight of what he was feeling. Someone who had been there during his darkest days, long before the fame and fortune. "I need your help with something," he said when they answered. "It's about a boy in Cincinnati, and it can wait." His voice cracked on the last word, but there was something else there too, a determination that was forming, crystallizing into a plan of action. The digital clock on his phone showed he had already missed his call time by 17 minutes. Outside his door, he could hear the murmur of concerned staff and the squawk of walkie-talkies as the production team scrambled to adjust. But Steve's emotional breakdown was just the beginning. What he decided to do next would leave his entire team speechless and set in motion a chain of events that nobody, not even Steve himself, could have anticipated. As he wiped his eyes and straightened his tie, the seed of an idea had already taken root. An idea that would soon shock his fans, his family, and the entertainment industry at large. An idea born from pain, empathy, and the words of a 12-year-old boy who had somehow reached through the television screen and touched the heart of a man he had never met. The production team of Family Feud had seen plenty of unusual situations over the years, contestants fainting from nerves, unexpected power outages, even the occasional celebrity guest going off script. But nothing had prepared them for what happened that Tuesday afternoon in October. When Steve Harvey finally emerged from his dressing room, 45 minutes later, well beyond the 30 he had requested, the transformation was striking. Gone was the shell-shocked expression, replaced by a calm determination that his longtime colleagues recognized as the look Steve got when his mind was irrevocably made up. His eyes, though still rimmed with red, had a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Get me the network executives on the phone," he told his personal assistant, Marcus, who had been fielding increasingly urgent calls from upstairs. "And find out everything you can about Cincinnati Children's Hospital. I need to know who runs their oncology department." The studio audience had been entertained with impromptu games and free merchandise, but patience was wearing thin. The day's shooting schedule was now hopelessly behind. The executive producer, Deborah Wilson, approached Steve with the practiced diplomacy of someone who had managed difficult talent for decades. "Steve, we've got 4 more episodes to shoot today. The network is breathing down my neck. Whatever this is," she gestured vaguely toward the dressing room, "can it wait until we wrap?" Steve looked at her, really looked at her, in a way that made Deborah feel suddenly transparent. "No, Deb, it can and after you hear what I'm about to tell you, you will understand why." He handed her Jordan's letter, watching as her expression shifted from irritation to confusion to something approaching the same emotional response he had. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening. "What are you thinking?" she asked quietly. "I'm thinking it time I used all this." He gestured around the gleaming set, the lights, the cameras, the trappings of his success for something that actually matters. Within the hour, an unprecedented conference call had been assembled. Steve's agent in Beverly Hills, the network president in New York, the show's legal team, and even Steve's wife, Marjorie, patched in from their home in Atlanta. Steve spoke uninterrupted for 15 minutes, outlining what he intended to do. When he finished, the silence on the line was deafening. "You were talking about walking away from 8 figures, Steve," his agent finally said. Not to mention breach of contract. The network could sue you into oblivion. Let them, Steve replied, his voice steady. Some things are more important than money. The network president cleared his throat. While I appreciate the sentiment here, Steve, there are other ways to help this child that don't involve derailing your career and our programming schedule. We could do a special episode, raise awareness, set up a foundation. With all due respect, Steve interrupted. I've made up my mind. Either you work with me on this, or I walk. Today. It was not an idle threat. Everyone on the call knew that Steve Harvey, for all his joviality on camera, was a man of uncompromising principles when it truly mattered. The show's success rested squarely on his shoulder-shiz rapport with contestants, his comic timing, his authentic reactions that had spawned countless memes and viral videos. He was irreplaceable, and he knew it. Marjorie, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. I support whatever decision Steve makes. Our family will be fine regardless. 3 hours later, as the studio audience was finally being ushered out with profuse apologies and promises of priority tickets to future tapings, Steve sat alone in the now quiet studio. The bright lights had been dimmed, the cameras covered. He held his phone in his hand, staring at the number Marcus had procured for him, the direct line to Dr. Eleanor Patel, head of pediatric oncology at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. His thumb hovered over the call button as the magnitude of what he was about to do washed over him. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he being impulsive, overreacting to an emotional trigger, throwing away a career at its peak? Then he remembered the words from Jordan's letter, words that had cut through all his defenses. Sometimes at night, when the pain is really bad and everyone thinks I'm sleeping, I wonder if anyone would really miss me if I just let go. Then I think about making Mom laugh, like how you make people laugh, and I hold on for one more day. Steve pressed the call button. As the phone rang, he felt a strange sense of peace settle over him. Whatever came next, controversy, career suicide, public misunderstanding, knew with absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. Dr. Patel speaking, came a crisp, professional voice. Steve took a deep breath. Doctor, my name is Steve Harvey. I'm calling about one of your patients, a boy named Jordan Mitchell, and I'm about to do something that might sound completely crazy to you. What Steve proposed in that conversation would soon make headlines across the country, leaving his fans stunned, his critics baffled, and his industry colleagues questioning his sanity. But for the first time in years, Steve Harvey wasn't thinking about ratings, endorsements, or his public image. He was thinking only of a boy in a hospital bed who had unknowingly changed the course of his life with nothing more than honesty, courage, and a sheet of lined paper. The headlines broke the following morning. Steve Harvey announces indefinite hiatus from all shows. Family Feud host walks away. A T-career peak network. Scrambles. Harvey's shocking departure leaves entertainment industry reeling. Social media exploded with speculation. Had there been a scandal about to break? Was he ill? Had there been a falling out with executives? The carefully worded press release offered little insight, stating only that Steve Harvey will be taking an extended leave of absence from his television and radio commitments to focus on personal matters of the utmost importance. What the public didn't know, what only a tight circle of confidants had been told, was that Steve was already on a private jet bound for Cincinnati. Beside him sat Marjorie, reviewing medical documents on her tablet. Across the aisle, a team of 3 specialists Steve had personally hired. Dr. Leila Santos, an oncologist who had pioneered an experimental treatment protocol in Sweden, Thomas Chen, a legal expert in medical advocacy, and Dr. Marcus Williams, a childhood friend of Steve's, who had become one of the nation's leading psychologists specializing in childhood trauma. The hospital administration is understandably concerned about your involvement, Chen was saying, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed notes from their preliminary conversations with Cincinnati Children's. They were worried about disruption, media attention, false hope. I understand all that, Steve interrupted, his voice carrying the same quiet intensity it had since reading Jordan's letter. But I've made promises I intend to keep. We just need to find a way to work within their system. Dr. Santos looked up from her review of Jordan S. medical records, her expression grave. Mr. Harvey, I need to be very clear about something. Based on what I am seeing here, this child's prognosis is extremely poor. The cancer has metastasized to his bone marrow, and he's already failed 2 rounds of aggressive chemotherapy. The treatment protocol I've developed has shown promise, but it's still experimental, and it costs $1.4 million that insurance 1T cover, Steve finished for her, which is why I've already transferred the funds to your research foundation. The question isn't whether we can treat how quickly we can begin. Marjorie reached over and squeezed her husband's hand, a silent gesture of support that spoke volumes. In their 15 years of marriage, she had seen many sides of Steve the entertainer, the businessman, the philanthropist, the family man, but this single-minded focus was something new, something transformative. There's something else you should know, Dr. Williams said, closing the file he'd been reviewing. I've spoken with Jordan's psychologist. The boy doesn't know you received his letter. He never expected it to reach you. It was more of a therapeutic exercise, his counselor suggested. Steve nodded slowly, absorbing this information. Then we need to approach this carefully. The last thing I want is to overwhelm him. As the plane began its descent into Cincinnati, Steve gazed out the window at the city below. Somewhere down there was a 12-year-old boy who had no idea that his words had set in motion a chain of events that would change multiple lives, own included. The meeting with hospital administration went exactly as Thomas Chen had predicted. Initial resistance, concerns about protocol and precedent, worries about media disruption, and celebrity involvement creating false expectations for other patients. But Steve Harvey hadn't become one of the most successful men in entertainment by being easily deterred. I understand your concerns, he told the hospital director, Dr. Eleanor Patel, and her team of administrators gathered in the conference room. But I'm not here as a celebrity. I'm not here for publicity or to film anything or to make promises I can keep. I'm here because a boy in your hospital wrote me a letter that... He paused, composing himself. A letter that made me realize I've been wasting the platform I've been given. Dr. Patel studied him carefully. In her 27 years of medicine, she had developed a finely tuned ability to read people's intentions. Mr. Harvey, while we appreciate your interest in Jordan's case, we have strict protocols about outside intervention in patient care. His medical team has been with him for 3 years. They know his case intimately, and I am not suggesting we replace them, Steve countered. I am suggesting we expand them. Dr. Santos here has developed a treatment that Jordan's insurance 1T cover. I am funding it. The legal team I've brought is here to cut through red tape, not create problems. And Dr. Williams is one of the country's foremost experts in helping children cope with terminal illness. A heavy silence fell over the room at the word terminal. It was the elephant that had been lurking in every corner of the conversation. Finally, Dr. Patel sighed. Jordan's mother has already expressed her support for your involvement. Given that and the resources you're offering, we can establish a framework for collaboration. She fixed Steve with a penetrating gaze. But I want to be very clear about something, Mr. Harvey. If at any point we determine your presence is detrimental to Jordan's well-being or the functioning of this hospital, we will ask you to step back, regardless of any financial contribution. Steve nodded, respecting her directness. I wouldn't have it any other way. As the meeting concluded and hands were shaken, Dr. Patel held Steve back for a moment. There's something you should prepare yourself for, she said quietly. Jordan has good days and bad days. Today is not a good day. The pain management has been challenging. Steve swallowed hard. I understand. But as he would soon discover, understanding the concept and facing the reality were entirely different things. Room 412 of the pediatric oncology ward was decorated with superhero posters and drawings from classmates' bright splashes of color against the institutional beige walls. Medical equipment beeped and hummed, creating a technological backdrop to the scene that was about to unfold. Steve stood in the doorway, momentarily frozen. The boy in the bed seemed impossibly small, swallowed up by blankets and surrounded by machines. His head was bare, his skin pale with an almost translucent quality. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and 4 lines snaked from his thin arm to a pump beside the bed. Beside him sat a woman who could only be his mother, the same eyes, the same determined set to her jaw, even as exhaustion lined her face. She looked up as Steve entered, and her eyes widened in recognition. "Mr. Harvey," she said, rising quickly. "I'm Amanda Mitchell, Jordan mom." She extended her hand, then seemed to reconsider and simply nodded instead. He's having a rough day. The pain medication makes him drift in and out." Steve found his voice. "Please call me Steve. And I understand, we don't have to do this now if it's not a good time." From the bed came a small, raspy voice. "Mom, who are you talking to?" Amanda turned quickly. "Jordan, honey, you have a visitor. Someone very special." The boy's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. When recognition dawned, his cracked lips parted in shock. "Steve Harvey?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the medical equipment. Steve moved to the bedside, summoning the warm smile that had welcomed countless contestants and guests over the years. But this was different. This wasn't television. This was real in a way that made his heart physically ache. "Hey there, Jordan," he said gently. "I got your letter." The next morning, Steve arrived at the hospital with a plan. He had transformed an unused patient lounge into a vibrant space filled with gaming consoles, a large-screen TV, and comfortable seating. It was designed not just for Jordan, but for all kids on the oncology floor, a place where they could escape the harsh realities of their treatments. When Jordan was wheeled into the room later that day, his eyes sparkled with excitement. "You did this?" he asked, amazed. "Well, I had some help," Steve replied, "but I thought we might need a place to hang out." The atmosphere was electric as Jordan, who had been subdued and exhausted just days before, engaged in a spirited Mario Kart competition with Steve. Laughter filled the space, drawing in other children and parents who hadn't seen such joy in a long time. After a while, Dr. Santos arrived to discuss Jordan's treatment plan. She explained an experimental immunotherapy that could potentially help him, but it came with risks and was still unproven. Jordan, surprisingly brave, asked, "When do we start?" "Tomorrow," Dr. Santos replied, impressed by his eagerness. As the adults discussed logistics, Dr. Williams sidled up to Steve. "You see yourself in him, Dontiu? The performance, the hiding of pain." Steve nodded. He wrote about feeling like a burden, about putting on a brave face for his mom. It resonates. Later, Amanda Mitchell, Jordan's mother, confronted Steve, asking if his interest in her son was genuine or if he would lose interest. Steve assured her, "I walked away from my career to be here. I am not going anywhere until Jordan doesn't need me anymore." Amanda revealed that before Steve's arrival, Jordan had lost his will to fight. Today was the first day he wanted to live again. As night fell, Steve felt a profound sense of purpose. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing he was where he needed to be. Little did he know, the next 72 hours would test that resolve in unimaginable ways. The next day began with an air of anxious anticipation. Jordan was prepped for the experimental immunotherapy that would begin in just a few hours. Steve arrived at the hospital early, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. He had spent the night reflecting on the conversations Head had with Amanda and Jordan, realizing the weight of the journey they were about to embark on together. In the pediatric oncology ward, the atmosphere was different. Nurses bustled about with purpose, their smiles tinged with hope as they prepared for the day's treatments. Steve watched as Jordan was wheeled into the treatment room, surrounded by a team of medical professionals who explained each step with calm reassurance. "Are you ready, buddy?" Steve asked, kneeling beside Jordan's bed, who was still groggy from the sedatives. "Ready as I'll ever be," Jordan replied, his voice barely above a whisper, but a spark of determination flickered in his eyes. After the medical team left to finalize preparations, Steve took a seat beside Jordan. You know, whatever happens today, you're doing something amazing. You're fighting. Jordan nodded, but his brow furrowed with uncertainty. What if it doesn't work? Steve leaned in closer, his voice steady. Then we try something else. You're not alone in this. I'm right here with you. As the treatment began, the room filled with the soft hum of machines and the gentle beeping of monitors. Jordan's mother, Amanda, held his hand tightly, her presence a comforting anchor. Steve remained nearby, offering encouragement and cracking jokes to lighten the mood. Hours passed, and as the initial treatment concluded, Jordan began to feel the effects. He was tired and wanted to sleep, but he also felt a sense of triumph. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was taking control of his own fate. Later that evening, after the treatment team had assessed Jordan's vital signs and given the green light for him to rest, Amanda and Steve stepped outside the room for a moment of quiet. "How do you think he's handling it?" Amanda asked, her voice low as they leaned against the wall of the corridor. "I think he's stronger than he knows," Steve replied, "and I think today was a turning point for him. Facing this fight is more than just physical, it's mental too. You're both doing great." As the days turned into a week, Jordan's condition fluctuated. Some days were better than others, with moments of laughter and joy shared over video games and stories. Other days were marked by pain and fatigue, where the weight of his illness felt too heavy to bear. But through it all, Steve remained a constant presence, cheering him on and providing a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. One afternoon, while they were playing a new game in the lounge, Jordan looked at Steve with a serious expression. "Do you think he'll ever get to go home?" Steve paused, searching for the right words. "I believe you will. Jordan, you're a fighter, and no matter what happens, you've got a whole lot of people rooting for you." Jordan smiled faintly, but the worry remained in his eyes. Sometimes I'm scared. "What if I don't make it?" Steve felt a lump in his throat but managed to respond. "It's okay to be scared. I am scared too. But we're going to face this together, one day at a time." As the second week of treatment progressed, the hospital staff began to notice something remarkable. Jordan's resilience, bolstered by Steve's unwavering support, seemed to inspire not just the other patients but also the medical team. Jordan's laughter filled the ward, lifting spirits and creating a sense of community among the families. Then came a day that would change everything. Dr. Santos called for a meeting with Amanda and Steve after Jordan's morning treatment. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. As they gathered in her office, the air felt thick with both hope and dread. "Jordan's response to the immunotherapy has been promising," Dr. Santos began, her tone cautiously optimistic. "The initial scans show a significant reduction in the tumor size. It's early, but we're hopeful." Amanda's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief and hope flooding her expression. "So, there's a chance?" "A chance," Dr. Santos confirmed, "but we need to continue monitoring closely. It's essential to stay cautious and not get ahead of ourselves." Steve felt a surge of emotion, his heart pounding in his chest. What do we need to do next? Continue. With the treatment regimen as planned and well-scheduled follow-up scans in a month, Dr. Santos replied. "But I want to emphasize that this is just the beginning. There will be challenges ahead." As the meeting concluded, Steve and Amanda stepped out into the corridor, where they were met with Jordan's eager gaze. "What did the doctor say?" he asked, his voice laced with anxiety. "They said you're responding well to the treatment," Steve replied, a grin breaking across his face. "You're kicking cancer's butt, buddy." Jordan's face lit up with joy, and for a moment, the weight of the illness seemed to lift. Yet beneath the surface, Steve knew the journey was far from over. They would need to face whatever came next, together. That evening, as the sun set over Cincinnati, Steve found himself reflecting on the past few weeks. The laughter, the tears, the moments of doubt and hope, it was all part of a journey he never expected to take. But in that moment, he realized how much Jordan had changed him, teaching him the true meaning of strength and resilience. As he prepared to leave the hospital that night, he turned to Amanda. Whatever happens, we're in this together. I'll be here every step of the way." Amanda nodded, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Steve. You've given him on May so much more than I ever thought possible." With renewed determination, Steve walked out of the hospital, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. Together, they would fight, and together, they would find hope.